Back in April of this year, beer company Bud Light, owned by AB InBev, they released new marketing material with transgender activist Dylan Mulvaney. The backlash was instantaneous, with customers boycotting the brand. The disagreement about Bud Light's next steps following the ad was also wrought with challenges. As companies think about marketing during such a polarized time, what light can be shed on the Bud Light backlash, and what does it mean for marketing moving forward? Let's bring in now Drexel University Associate Professor of Marketing Daniel Korschun and University of Toledo Professor of Geography Neil Reid. And staying with us right now, of course, is Brooke DePalma. Daniel, want to begin with you. This thing seems like it has some legs. This is sticking around. Tensions have been raised, and there could be some long-term consequences here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is really sticking around a lot longer than we normally see for a boycott like this. I mean, usually these things kind of tend to peter out even when they hit a political nerve like this. But here we're seeing, I mean, there's a real galvanizing of support for this. I guess we could call it a protest movement that's partly driven, I think, from some media channels that are, reminding consumers that this is an important issue. So it's really has a lot more staying power than I expected, but I think it's going to be going on for months, if not years.
And Neil, really what's so interesting here is that they're doubling down on saying that we're a beer company. We're here to serve everyone. Do you think that's the right move to make here?
Well, yeah, I think, going forward, they really got to think about, the message that they send to consumers. And I think what they did with the Mulvaney incident is they kind of got out of their lane. And I think they really got to get back into the lane and focus on the fact that this is a beer for everyone. Stay out of politics, stick to the sports and the other types of advertising that we're familiar with. And I think that's one of the keys going forward. But like Daniel said, I don't think they're going to get back these beer drinkers who have basically abandoned them for another product.
Daniel, it seems that Bud Light, AB InBev has kind of walked back some of their comments, and at the end of the day, they're a little bit indecisive. Just wondering how that fits in and how that's affected their marketing campaign in general. Does that put people off?
That's the worst place you can be, is kind of stuck in the middle trying to speak to both sides. And that's been, I think, a big issue. And it's a reason why, in this case, even though they alienated some consumers, they didn't pick up anyone on the other side, because the people on the other side were upset that the company even apologized for having a partnership with a trans influencer. So it's that wishy-washiness that consumers were picking up, or at least that they were thinking that they were picking up. And that wishy-washiness means that they don't really have a strong idea of what the brand is. And I think that's what they were saying in that announcement, the quote that you played earlier, that they need to focus on what the brand is about. I don't think, though, that they can avoid politics altogether. I don't think that that's, in my research, I find that that's not a realistic way to go about it. The trick is to find the issues that make sense with the brand. And here they overstepped a little bit, and they weren't explicit about how this partnership might relate to other things that people know about the brand. And that is part of what caused this controversy to blow up so big.
Neil, let's take a look forward here. I mean, we're on the crux of football season, Super Bowl right around the corner. Where does Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch largely go from here? Do they push more into those Sunday night football marketing, and do they try to sponsor a little more come Super Bowl time of year? Where do they go from here, and how do they ultimately gain back that share that they lost with this new reaffirmed key audience in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I said in my previous comment, I think they continue to focus on those marketing types of efforts which have been successful with them before. I mean, we always look forward to the Super Bowl and the Budweiser ads, and this connection with football has been a very strong one for them. But again, going back to what I said before, they are not going to get these drinkers back who abandoned them. I mean, beer drinkers are creatures of habit, and so those who made that switch from, say, Bud Light to Coors Light, they're going to stick with Coors Light. And Coors Light is very similar to Bud Light. Most consumers could not tell the difference in terms of taste. Pricing is very much the same. So I don't think they can think about getting any of these beer drinkers back. I think the focus now is, kind of keeping out of those controversial topics, or as Daniel said, if they do kind of enter into politics, kind of thinking about it in a more holistic manner. And but I really think they need to stick with what they're good at, which is producing beer and keeping on track with their branding.
And Daniel, when we think about the competitors in the field, first of all, politics has really inserted itself in a lot of brands, but is that something that brands should necessarily avoid? Could it be a good thing? Because you take a look, as you point out in your notes, at their biggest competitor, Modelo, who's now gained and surpassed in market share. Well, they're a little bit political.
Absolutely. They've been very outspoken on immigration from Mexico in particular. And that's been a positive point for them, I think. So so again, I go back and I've studied this for 20 years now and seen the development, and I'm seeing is that customers and employees too, we shouldn't forget other stakeholders. They're looking more deeply about what drives the company, what their motivations are, and they're trying to figure out, as Neil pointed out before, there's a lot of parity in the market, and when there's parity in terms of quality, people look deeper. And what they're looking at is they're trying to find out what is it that makes this company tick. And politics is often, it's a way of, it's sort of like a reflection of what's driving the company, what they care about, and what their values are.
And in terms of, let's talk about sales returning as we edge towards this summer. I think, this question really for you, Neil, as you sort of double down on that consumer, as you sort of say that, we're going to stick to that. Do they try again to perhaps, introduce more premiumization options? Do they double down on maybe their, different type of audience that wouldn't necessarily be this Bud Light drinker? Or do you think that really the play here is to just stick to and not maybe sort of offer up a premium brand?
Well, within the US, we've seen this big shift in the last 20 years towards craft, right? So there certainly is a beer drinking segment there who's interested in higher quality product. But I think in terms of Anheuser-Busch, they should, again, I say they stick with what has been successful for them in the past. And again, they can forget about getting these drinkers back. So I think, what they're now going to think about is how can they perhaps promote some of their other brand beers and maybe try to gain some market share with them. And I think that might be one possibility for them.
Daniel, we got time for one more here. Briefly, anything that we didn't cover in this discussion that you'd like to add to the conversation?
I think one thing that we tend to overlook, as I mentioned just a moment ago, is that the effect on employees and distributors. That's something that from what I've read, I have no inside information, but they seem to be very aware of the distributors and how they're feeling about this, how it's impacting them. They've done, from what I've seen, a pretty good job of addressing that. Employees is an issue that we haven't spoken at all about, but these are people that are, if employees get turned off, then they can be not as motivated at work, maybe go to others, and it could help recruiting. So it's a much bigger issue than just the consumers and the market share, although, of course, that's what is driving the revenue.
Yeah, employees are very big and important stakeholders as well. Thank you, Drexel University Associate Professor of Marketing Daniel Korschun and University of Toledo Professor of Geography Neil Reid.